I'd like to talk about one of the most efficient objects in the world. And that's what we do. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a super efficient tool this morning. And a tool that is efficient in everything it does, whether it be good stuff or not so good stuff. One that hits the mark almost every time. A tool that is so powerful that it can divide nations, it can start wars, it can mend hearts, can make people feel joy, impactful in everything it does. Does anybody want to guess what it is?
Your tongue.
Yes, good guess. Your tongue.
Yeah.
Your tongue is so powerful, and it can be used for good or evil, and it's equally powerful no matter what it does. God tells us in His Word how powerful our tongue is. I'll read a little excerpt I clipped here. It says, God tells us in His Word the tongue has an incredible power. We can use our tongue to bring blessings in life or curse and death. The saying, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words will never hurt me. It's just simply not true. Our tongue can be the most difficult thing to control and leave us with great regret if we use our words to hurt others. Everybody has their Bibles. Let's turn to 1 Peter, the 3rd chapter, the 10th verse. For those who can't hear online, because Dad's further away, it says, if you want to enjoy life and see many happy days, keep your tongue from speaking evil and your lips from telling lies. That's pretty clear. Doesn't mince any words. I think we all hear that and we all say, yep, we agree. Right? I don't see anybody going like this, so that's good. But that's hard to do. It's just hard to control your tongue. I mean, I don't know that anybody's mastered it. Stephen Covey has a saying that I think leads to why we speak poorly of others and why we are so quick to jump on being critical with our tongues of others' actions. And he said, we judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their behavior.
Yeah.
It's really true. It's okay, because I didn't really mean to do that. I just had to make that point. But if somebody else does something, look what they did, right? There's just no grace. And that leads to us wanting to discuss what they did. That was wrong. I mean, today we have such a toxic society, and that's okay, because we know that until the Lord comes back and He establishes His kingdom on earth, that we're just not going to have peace. Because it is not a monarchy where Christ sits at the head, but we have a democracy and we have free speech. And we've got all this junk out there today. And the world's just toxic. And it's all about being polarized, right? You're either way here or you're way here, but you can't be here. And that's just a product of our society today, okay? I mean, you watch this news or that news, but you don't watch them both, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that's the world we live in. But you know, the problem is that we're just looking to judge everybody, and then to talk about it, and to further extrapolate just how bad somebody is for what they did, right? And we do this in every facet of life. We do it in politics. We do it in our own family relationships. We do it at work. We do it with friends. This is very typical. We're going to read a passage that everybody's read many times as we start to cue this up in James, the 3rd chapter. Dear brothers and sisters, I'm reading out of the NLT. Not many of you should become teachers in the church, for we who teach will be judged more strictly. Indeed, we all make many mistakes. For if we could control our tongues, we would be perfect and could also control ourselves in every other way. We can make a large horse go wherever we want by means of a small bit in its mouth and a rudder makes a huge ship turns wherever the pilot chooses to go, even though the winds are strong. In the same way, the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches. But a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And among all the parts of the body, the tongue is a flame of fire. It is a whole world of wickedness, corrupting the entire body. It can set your whole life on fire, for it is set on fire by hell itself. Those are some pretty strong words about your tongue right there that Jesus' brother James is talking about how powerful your tongue is and how much trouble it can get you in and how hard it is to control. People can tame all kinds of animals, birds and reptiles and fish, but no one can tame the tongue. It is restless and evil, full of deadly poison. Sometimes it praises our Lord and Father, and sometimes it curses those who have been made in the image of God. And so blessing and cursing come pouring out of the same mouth. Surely, my brothers and sisters, this is not right. Does a spring of water bubble out of it both fresh water and bitter water? Does a fig tree produce olives or a grapevine produce figs? No, and you cannot draw fresh water from a salty spring. So James spends a lot of time here talking about just how powerful your tongue is, how evil it can be, and how much trouble it can get you in. Our words, whether we realize it or not, are powerful. And in all honesty, to me, our words are more powerful to those listening to them than to us saying them. Does that make sense? I mean, a lot of times I will say something that I kind of mean, but I'll say it more sharply to make sure that I make my point. But I don't 100% think that guy's worthless. I just say that because he did a bad job on something that I think he should have done a better job on, let's say, right? But if I were to tell that to somebody, even though I may not be convinced he's really worthless, he might think, man, that guy thinks I'm worthless. That's really impactful. That is, but of the words we say, to me, those are the best kind because, I mean, at least own up. And if you have an issue, you need to go take care of it head on. But it's when we start trying to put poison in other people's ear. Human nature is cowardly because it's human nature. So I'm not talking about how we want to be. I'm talking about our human nature, our natural instincts. And it's to be cowardly. It's to talk about people behind their back. It's just one of the fruits of the flesh, unfortunately. And our words are powerful. But we also have an opportunity to use our words to spread life. And this super efficient tool in our mouth, it's our tongue, can be just as efficient and effective when it's spreading life. You know, it feels good when somebody gives you a compliment. It does. When I say, hey, Josh, you're really smart. It feels good, right? When we tell somebody that. When somebody comes up to us and says something just nice, like, hey, great to see you this morning. Boy, you look good. You know, well, thanks. It makes us feel good. When we spread life and when we use this super efficient tool in our mouth to talk about things of the Lord and to talk about truths, it is really effective to those that are listening. I had an opportunity yesterday. We were up playing in the mountains, and I have a customer in town right now from Louisiana, and he is a handful. I mean, a handful. He's a really nice guy, but for every word I said, he said 2,000 yesterday, all day. That's not an exaggeration.
I met him, that's true.
You met the guy. Josh met him. That guy, I mean, I know he doesn't do drugs, but I think he's like on meth and crack and all of them at one time with a bunch of coffee. Because he just never stops, always talking. And he's animated in his talking. And he's fun to hang out with, but he's exhausted, right? But yesterday he asked me, he said, well, tell me how you did this business thing, whatever. Well, I had an opportunity, and he's a Christian, he's a believer. But I had an opportunity to talk about the Lord and what the Lord has done for us. And for the first time since I've known Delmar, I said 500 words without being interrupted once. Okay? Now, I didn't say anything. It wasn't me, but the thing is, I was able to use a super efficient tool that's in my mouth to talk about Christ and what Christ has done for me. And he was listening intently. And it struck me just how efficient my tongue can be when used for good, for God's glory. And in doing this, a few things we have to learn to do is we have to learn to demonstrate grace with our words, which is really hard to do. It's just against our nature. It's just not human, right? It's not what we want to do. I want to read you a couple quotes I pulled up on your tongue this morning from some smarter people as we continue to kind of work down this subject. Samuel Johnson said, "Never trust your tongue when your heart is bitter." That's good. There are times that your heart gets bitter. It doesn't always have to be bitter, but sometimes it gets bitter because you get really angry. You turn on the news and you see a story and you want to get bitter, and then you want to respond to others about what your opinion is of that. And then you know what happens? And others take on, and then it perpetuates itself. Another saying is, the wise person has long ears and a short tongue. That's a good one. Long ears and a short tongue. A sharp tongue, this is a really good one, a sharp tongue and a dull mind are usually found in the same head. Dude, that is really true. Sharp tongue and a dull mind are found in the same head. Here's a pretty simple one. A fool cannot hold his tongue. Well, last one I'll read you is, the amazing truth about the human tongue. It takes 3 years to learn how to use it, but it takes a lifetime to learn when and where to use it. That's pretty true. And I suspect this is something that we'll struggle with our entire life. I mean, James was pretty frank about his discussion about the tongue. We likely will fight our tongues until the day we die. Some more than others. Some, we all have different challenges. There are some things that we're just naturally a little weaker to than others are, but we all have our flesh to deal with. But there are times, everybody agrees what I'm saying, I imagine. But there are times when we have conflict in our life, and that we have to use our tongue to solve said conflict. And those are times, I think, that we typically get ourselves in the most trouble because we're somewhat justified to have a conversation. You step on my toes every day. Every day you step on my toes, I have to talk to you about stepping on my toes because it's uncomfortable. I don't want you to step on my toes anymore, okay? And so we're justified in bringing up a conversation, but we want to be cautious with our tongue. And so staying in the book of James, let's go to the first chapter, the 5th and the 6th verse. It says, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. Okay, that's good. Step number 1. You need wisdom. I have to talk to somebody about what they keep doing that needs to be discussed because we got to fix it. There's a good way to fix it. There's the scorched earth approach, of which I typically choose because it's the quickest and most effective. You make a point, right? And there's no doubt about what you were thinking. That's the wrong approach, right? So we need to ask wisdom first for God. So we say, Lord, please give me wisdom. Here we read, God will not rebuke us for asking. But when you ask him, this is key, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Now, if I'm going to talk to you about a conflict, and my faith is kind of in God, and I prayed about it, but my faith's really in Nick, the result's not going to be the best, right? Like, Lord tells me I need to forgive you. But I am justified because I have a sore toe because you keep stepping on my toes, right? If I'm not completely listening to God, I'm going to find a way to weave my flesh point into the conversation. And therefore, I render the conversation somewhat useless and pointless and just an act of futility, right? So make sure your faith is in God alone. Not you and God alone, just God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed in the wind. I don't know if anybody's ever found themselves in this situation before, but I have. Where I prayed for wisdom, then I go talk to an individual, and I find it's too hard to fight my human nature with my tongue, and I let it run a little bit. Not the whole time, but I let it run a little too much. And then I find the response from the other individual, unfortunately for her, oftentimes my wife, on that conflict. I see what I've done. I've said more than I should. I've been too vocal about a point that probably wasn't worth really vocalizing. And it impacts her, and then I find myself apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry, because clearly I took it too far, right? I hope nobody else has ever experienced that. But I think the important thing here is we don't want to be a ship that is tossed about the sea without any type of a rudder, right? And the only way that we're not that ship is if we're only listening to one voice. So we can't listen to our voice and God's voice. If we're gonna pray for wisdom, let's pray for wisdom. When God gives us wisdom, let's leave our own wisdom out of it and only point our ship that direction. Because otherwise you're going left, you're going right. And sometimes you guys, I'm sure we've all been in conversations where the person goes, what point are you even trying to make right now? Because there's the right point you know, and then there's this idiotic point that you feel, and you're just like a ship going all around the sea right now, left and right, and I don't even know what you're doing, right? It's just not where you want to be. But then we find ourselves entrenched in a foolish position because, well, we've let our tongue run a little bit. Now we got to feel like we further have to defend it. And the next thing you know, you just make a mess of everything, right? And those messes, they vary in different degrees. If you have a wife that's full of grace like me, you normally get away with it. And you have a conversation and eventually, but sometimes if you're talking to somebody who's maybe struggling in their life, and that's why they're responding real poorly to everything, and you have a chance to minister life to them, but you minister death to them with your tongue instead, that has a big impact. Because maybe they say, you know what, that guy's a believer, and look how he just responded to me. I don't want to be like that. It's a really efficient tool. James tells us that, when we listen to God, we can't have a foot on both sides. And as humans, our human nature, so nobody's bad in here for being human, because you're all humans that I can tell, right? So, okay, and now as humans, we have a sinful nature because we're born into it. Adam's sin, it's a curse upon us, it's how we are. Okay, we all have to know that. And our human nature is super, super cunning, like really cunning, right? And a few examples of that is this. If somebody upsets us and we want to use our tongue to cause trouble, we will talk to somebody, we'll pick the right person, so maybe somebody that we're close to, maybe a family member, okay? And we'll say things like, this person said that, but it just doesn't bother me, it's okay. Okay, if it doesn't bother you and it's okay, why'd you say it? I said it because I know my wife's going to get fired up because she loves me. So when I say, this person did that, but it's okay. Don't get upset, honey. Well, she doesn't, but I do. She just doesn't tell me because she knows I go too far most times. But that's what we do. In our own human nature that's very, very cunning, we say, oh, but it's okay. Oh, I'm just telling this to you. Don't tell this to anybody else. Okay, well, that means you're laying a trap for yourself and for the person you're talking to. Don't do that, right? Because now I've said, oh, hey, just so you know, but don't say anything to anybody else about this. Then you shouldn't say anything. Yeah. It's like this. When you say, hey, I don't mean to cause offense, the next words out of your mouth are always offensive. Look, I respect you, but the next words are always going to be disrespectful, right? Okay? So when I say, hey, I just don't want anybody else to know this, but I'm going to tell you, that means the next thing that comes out of my mouth is death. That thing that we read about James, how fresh water and salt water can't come out of the same spring except for your mouth. That means I'm just about to deliver some salt water out of what should be a freshwater spring. And not only am I going to do it to me, now I'm going to compromise you too, because I'm going to drag you along with me, right? And my sinful nature knows that you're probably not going to internalize it, not tell anybody. I'm telling you because I know how you're going to respond. You know, if I were to tell somebody that I know and love, hey, I don't want you to say anything else, but this person really did me wrong, I'm only telling them because I know some point they're going to be vengeful. I don't know what degree, but they're going to be. If for no other reason, they're not going to like that person anymore, right? Now, is that ministering life or death? I mean, we read in James that we've learned to control and to domesticate all kinds of things. I'm just passed away. You can tame a tiger, but you can't tame the tongue in your mouth. And that thing where James says you can take a massive ship and big winds, and with a little rudder behind it, you can change its direction, right? So we got to learn how to control our tongues, and we have to do it for us, for our sake, and we also need to do it for all those around us, because we don't want to have this self-perpetuating vicious cycle that we create with our tongues. Let's see. We are living in a time where division is everywhere. And as we see division everywhere, we've been called to be separate and to be different. We call ourselves Christians in here, right? What is a Christian? Christ-like. A Christian is Christ-like. If we're going to be separate, and today I think the draw to be separate, our focus on being Christ-like needs to be greater today than ever before. We live in dark, challenging times. Here's the thing. You want to be where Jesus wants you. But the other thing is this. We live in a hurting world. And the world needs to see hope in Jesus' people. Because that's what brings people to him. That's what glorifies God. Father, Lord, I thank you for meeting with us this morning, for allowing us this opportunity through Zoom and in person, Lord, just to all be together. All of us Christians who are just standing here saying we want to be like Jesus, and we know we missed the mark. We know we have our flesh and our human nature. And Lord, we just pray this morning that you would give us an extra measure of your Spirit and your presence, so that we could overcome those things that we struggle so mightily with, like our words. And Lord, that you could use us as effective tools to go spread your love, your forgiveness, your grace, so that we could be a city on a hill, so that we could be effective salt that hasn't lost its saltiness, and that we could be used to do good and to further your kingdom, Father. We pray these things in your name. Amen.